All right, so this is part 2 of our discussion on what it means to be a disciple. If you missed part 1, you can just go back and click on the playlist to check that out. We ended last week on the reality that disciples, one of their primary goals was to be like their teacher. And that is far more, again, than just receiving information and giving that information back to their teacher. Of course, there's an element of receiving information, but it was receiving that information to live it out. But not only receiving the information, but living with and being with their rabbi so closely and intimately that they see the rabbi's character. They see how the rabbi responds to situations with others. They see the rabbi, how they care for the poor, right? And then they begin to imitate and participate with the rabbi in those things. Now, that might be intimidating, I thought, for many of us, whenever we realize that if we're disciples of Jesus, Jesus is our rabbi, and that's a high standard, right, for us to live up to. A couple things on this. First of all, let us remind ourselves that we are Christ's body. It's just not an idea or something that we're kind of. We are followers of Jesus who declare him as Lord and live out their lives in submission to his will, in deep love for him, for his kingdom. We are part of his body. We are his body. We're not in this alone. You are not in it alone to be like Jesus alone. We are together in it. And we are together then growing up into Christ. No one has got it made. I don't have it made. I'm sure you probably don't. If you do, then post in the comments about how perfect you are. But we are struggling and wrestling and growing together. And just because Jesus is, I guess, lack of better words, the standard is high, it doesn't mean that that's not our goal and that's not our aim, is to embody him as perfectly as we can to the world. Now, with that said, let's talk about kind of what we're going to be discussing today, and that is the cost of being a disciple. In light of the reality that the disciple was to be like their teacher, we may go, wow, that is difficult. And the interesting thing with Jesus is that he really made no bones about it. Being a disciple was going to be hard. In fact, he tells people to count the costs before they choose to be his disciple. So let's think about the crowds, first of all, and the way when he would teach the crowds, there were tons of people oftentimes around him listening. And he would say things sometimes that was like, why would you say that if you're trying to build a ministry, Jesus? Like in today's popular Christianity, we would take the preacher off the stage and say, don't say that, or you're going to lose some of your church. Jesus didn't care. Like that wasn't what he wasn't going for getting a bunch of butts in the seats. He would say things sometimes like, eat my flesh and drink my blood. And it said that at that point, many people left him, stopped following him because that word, that teaching was too hard for them to receive. He would also then have people that would come up to him and say, a teacher of the law said, I want to follow you wherever you go. Very interested in him, very interested in his teaching. May have seen him do some miracles or heard of the miracles and is like, man, I really want to follow you. And Jesus' response is not, yeah, way to go, buddy. I'm glad that you want to follow me. I love you so much. Sometimes we paint Jesus in that picture, but it wasn't. He responds and says, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He basically says, listen, if you want to come follow me, you need to recognize that I rely on the hospitality of others and that you too will have to rely on the hospitality of others. I don't have this purse with a bunch of money that we go around to staying at the nicest hotels and different things. We're just trusting that our Father, and my Father and our Father will, as he would eventually say, will take care of us, right? There's other times whenever he challenged the people who were his disciples or thinking about being his disciples and would say things like, you have to deny yourself. Pick up your cross daily. If you want to be my disciple, you have got to deny yourself. And topics like that are things that we often just don't hear many people talking about it. And if we do, it's kind of, I don't know, just rigid and you got to deny yourself and, this kind of stuff that people get all fired up about sometimes. But really, we should meditate on the reality that he says that we have to deny ourselves. And in a culture where we are basically taught self-love, 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 you've got to love yourself, we have something that's completely countercultural with Jesus saying, deny yourself, right? That doesn't mean you're supposed to hate yourself and all this kind of stuff, but Jesus is recognizing the fact that the mission that he is on is dangerous. The mission that he is on from God is hard, right? He is going around proclaiming that there is another kingdom. It's not Caesar's kingdom. In fact, that is the ultimate reason, in a sense, in which he died, right? Is that as they were trying to crucify him and they were having conversations with Pilate, the getcha for Pilate, who seems like he was trying to release Jesus, was the fact that he was saying he was another king. And Caesar is not going to like that. And you are no friend of Caesar's, Pilate, if you allow someone like that to live. So this subversive, this challenging message and mission that he was living out, he understood that if he had people who wanted to be disciples, that they have to learn to say no. That just as Jesus, God doesn't tell us to do things that he doesn't already embody, not who he is and not what he's already done. That he has to recognize that Jesus had to deny himself whenever it came to many things, particularly the cross, dying a horrifying death as a criminal, recognizing that he could have chosen not to. He could have chosen to fulfill what his self would have been bubbling up. Think of Gethsemane and the wrestling with God in prayer during that. Let's just not do that. Let's go do more healings. Let's go around and teach more. That could be more effective for the kingdom and miss the mission of God. And he says that if we want to be disciples of Jesus, that we too have to pick up that cross, that we have to recognize. He would tell his disciples then, and that was very real, right? That they could, and many of them did die for the faith. But also for us as we read Jesus' words, recognizing that there is a daily death to self that we live out, allowing then the life and spirit of God to live through us. That is the exciting part about it, is whenever we die to ourself, when we pick up our cross, when we count the cost and choose to do that, new life springs up, resurrected life springs up, so that we can go into the world and participate in God's mission, so that we can go and be with those that are hurting. See, if we claim to be disciples, and I'm asking myself these same questions. This is not something I'm preaching at people. I'm really wrestling with this internally and reflectively. If I claim to be a disciple of Jesus, am I with those who are hurting? Am I having to deny myself because I'm spending so much time with those who are in pain, who are suffering, spending time with those who are struggling to have food on their table? Am I spending time with the hurting mother who has lost one of their children? And I'm not trying to say that there aren't joyous moments. There are joyous moments in the kingdom where we shout and rejoice and we do these things. And we celebrate the kingdom. There's so many great joyous moments. But there's a reality that, am I ever really having to deny myself? Is the denying myself just, a few taboo Christian things that I'm not supposed to do this or do that, but my life is pretty much like others? Or is there a constant reality every day that I'm denying kind of that old self that was crucified with Christ? Gosh, I guess I go on a whole nother teaching on that. And allowing his spirit to live through me, to bring reconciliation to the world through me, through us, to bring healing to the broken through us. As I mentioned earlier, Jesus says there's no builders, who decide that they're going to build a building, don't count the cost first. They don't just start erecting the building and then all of a sudden halfway through go, oh, we don't have the money, or I don't have the labor to finish this. They carefully plan it out. They count if they're going to have the money, the labor, the resources to build the building, if they can get the materials in time, and they choose to build it. So that's what we do as disciples, or as those considering to be disciples. Even if we feel like we've been disciples for a long time, I'm finding myself right now, as I've been meditating on this for the last week or so, reflecting, going, have I really counted the cost? Have I really counted how we lose everything and yet we gain everything at the same time when we choose to be disciples of Jesus?